Introducing Worlds Within, the tabletop RPG that puts you in control of your adventure your way. Whether you're an experienced gamer or just starting out, this game is tailored to your imagination. In Worlds Within, you can be the silent hero with magical music, a genetically engineered super soldier battling through a grim dark universe, or even a humble rancher facing a quirky Armageddon of farm animals. Your story, your choice. With simple rules and limitless possibilities, it's designed for 2 to 5 players and works with any setting or character. Ready to embark on your journey? Join our community, team up with friends, and start crafting your world at worldswithin.net. When you back our Kickstarter, you'll gain complete access to the Worlds Within rulebook, the abridged guide for quick reference, character sheets, pre-made creatures, items and abilities, and an intuitive roll chart for streamlined gameplay. Don't miss your chance to be part of this gaming revolution. Visit worldswithin.net and support our Kickstarter today. Your adventure begins here.
Mon amis, to HMP as we continue our Classics You Might Not Have Seen series as we cover Jacques Tati's 1967 film Playtime. And joining me today, he's always in the background doing something, Bruce Leslie.
Je suis un HMP'er, from the army.
From the army, of course. And today we're talking Playtime, everybody. This is a movie that I like the whole idea of our classics you might not have seen. And remember, we always have to put on the might because there's some film nerd out there that goes, pardon me, but I have seen this film and ergo your title is incorrect. So it's classics you might not have seen. And this week we're covering Playtime. Had you ever heard of this movie before, Bruce?
No, I had never heard of the movie. I was not familiar with Jacques Tati. In general, I'll just say, as far as my own biases go, I've never really enjoyed French cinema.
That's
so
fair.
Pretty much all I could say is I know who Luc Besson, Gerard Depardieu, and the Lumieres are, and that's about it.
But big on the French cuisine, though.
I mean, I like the fries.
Oh, okay.
But I prefer the waffles from Belgium.
I'm a pommes frites man.
Their toast is excellent.
I walked into this Parisian restaurant and they ain't have no French toast. Actually, I just ordered toast and they brought me toast, and I was a little bit peeved. I thought we was going to get some French toast, but turns out toast is just toast over there as well.
If you go into a French restaurant, it's okay to order the cock. It's not what you think.
Careful. But yeah, we're talking Playtime today. I'm Sean is still off at the Cracker Factory here. That's on fire from what we're to understand. So he's got to take care of all of that stuff, which was a real shame because this feels like a movie that is absolutely up his alley, does it not?
He was very excited when he heard the selection.
So, I mean, it's so up his alley because it is a very kind of, I don't want to say artsy fartsy, but it is in a way. There's a lot of stuff that's going on, and we'll talk about it.
It's the kind of thing, if you're the sort of person who just can sit back and really admire what somebody's doing with the resources they have, which I can do sometimes, but not necessarily. I'm more likely to do it on lower end stuff. He's more likely to really appreciate, like he really loved the Kurosawa movie. I think he sees it on a level that I don't. Like, I think what appeals to him is different than what appeals to me, but he really does seem to like these landmark cinematic achievements.
Well, I think part of the high and low bid, though, is that the first 10 minutes of that movie, all they're doing is talking about shoes.
You know what? I never even made that connection.
So he just goes, he tells us, he texts us, he's like, the first 10 minutes of this movie, oh my God, this may be the best movie that I've seen this year. And when you go back and look at it, the first 10 minutes of that movie, all about shoes.
All about quality over quantity on shoes.
Yeah, he's just like, he's sitting back there, white knuckle in his chair going, finally, somebody's had the nerve to say it on the silver screen.
I'll tell you something that I learned from a French guy named Napoleon Bonaparte. Quantity has a quality all its own.
Ooh, that's awful nice. And speaking of quality, the people that have voted for this month's thing and that support this show are people over at patreon.com/HMP. Those awesome people get pre-show, post-show, Dinger Zone. This week's Dinger Zone, as some of you may have realized, We are not reviewing the Marvels on HMP as would normally be our case, but you know what? We want to get you on the methadone that for HMP. So we've left our Marvels review. Bruce and I actually did go out to see that movie, and we've left our review over there on the Dinger Zone. So if you want to hear what Bruce and I thought of the Marvels, and it may actually surprise you what we thought of the Marvels, go over to patreon.com/HMP, join up at any level, help keep this program going, and get yourself more content in the exact same time, man.
You need to be a little more clickbaity. You won't believe what we had to say about the Marvels.
Brie Larson is never going to recover after this one.
You won't believe this shocking mid-credits revelation.
The mid-credit revelation that will bring you to your knees and cry your eyes out for days on end.
I bet you never saw this coming.
We can really, I tell you what, if that doesn't make you go to patreon.com/HMP, I don't know what will. But if you can't, like, for example, let's just say that you're just dead broke, right? All you need to do is go over to your friends and say, hey, man, I listen to this movie, this HMP program, put it on their phone, let them know what's there, or go review us on iTunes, man. Give us a 5-star review, a.k.a. a humdinger.
Humdinger.
This week, we've got one. We got one, man. We got one.
Nice. Oh, yeah, Ghostbusters.
This one is 5 stars, shock of all shocks, and is entitled Humdinger. There's a lot of M's in there. It's by Jay Radford, and he did it on Halloween, no less. Super spooky. And it reads as follows. Well, it took me a few years, but I finally figured out how to leave a review. You're welcome. And that comes from Jay Radford. Jay, thank you for writing that review, that 5-star review, a.k.a. Humdinger.
Humdinger.
We really appreciate that, man. And we, again, appreciate you and all the people that support the show. Patreon.com/HMP. Let's get into it, Bruce. Here's the IMDb plotline for Playtime. As we know, IMDb always 100% correct in everything they say and or do. Monsieur Hulot curiously wanders around a high-tech Paris, paralleling a trip with a group of American tourists. Meanwhile, a nightclub/restaurant prepares its opening night, but it's all still under construction. This is written by Jacques Tati and Jacques Larange, and Art Buchwald. I think Art was probably the guy who wrote all the American dialogue.
Buchwald. Yeah, Art Buchwald is a known commodity, isn't he?
Sure. Well, part of the Buchwald estate, from what I'm to understand. Directed by Jacques Tati. Like we said, you'd never really seen this film before. I think I'd seen half of this movie, but it was one of those, again, for the classics we haven't seen. Part of it is me also wanting to have an excuse to go back and watch something and to kind of make myself do so. So this was one of those for me where I'm like, okay, I'm finally going to finish this movie. Because I do want to preface this for everyone up top. It is 2.5 hours long. This is a long movie. Could it be shorter? Yes.
Are you sure? I thought it was like 2 hours long.
It
feels long. I'm not gonna lie.
2:35. Yeah.
Despite being, a clinic in cinematography, if you will, it's lost me in this. The middle sagged for me a little bit. It kind of went on.
Well, let's get into it here because let me sell everybody on this French film from the 60s because this sucker's got everything. We've got jazz music over pillowy white clouds. Fun at the airport. We've got France. Is it France? I don't think they want you to know it's France, or maybe who's to say? We got a Mr. Magoo type character. Americans on vacation. Office building tours. Testing out chairs. Walking down halls. Opening doors. Getting in and out of elevators. Getting lost. Robert Altman clearly watched this movie stoned and was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do that." We got living in a glass case of emotion. Dinner at a half-finished restaurant. Drugstore dinner, cold light of day, and the circus that is life. This movie has everything. And I know that doesn't sound like I've talked about a lot of things, but believe it or not, that is kind of what happens in this movie.
And just to close the loop on Art Buchwald, in 1988, Art Buchwald sued Paramount Pictures for stealing his script treatment that became Coming to America.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, okay.
Did he win?
I doubt it.
No, they probably got way better lawyers than he does.
Oh, wow. They wrote a book about it called Fatal Subtraction, the inside story of Buchwald v. Paramount.
Hey, listen, I love a good Hollywood book. I don't know what it is, but there is any of those Hollywood history books and stuff like that. I am all about it. I'm not somebody who was super familiar with Tati's work or anything like that. I'd
Well, let me
obviously
ask
seen
you,
the box set.
before you get into it, I wanted to know, how did you run across this? What was your inspiration for picking this? Tell me a little bit about what you knew about this going into it.
Well, it was I had obviously seen there's a Criterion box set of Jacques Tati's work that's like, I think 5 films of his, and this was one of them. And it's obviously the one that kind of people talk about a whole bunch. As I'm sure for a lot of Americans, French cinema, not the easiest of things to get into from time to time, especially, like when I was younger, for example, and like, you're just learning about cinema and all the different, world cinemas and things of that nature and the times with which they were in. So like watching French New Wave when you're like 11, 12 years old and stuff is very confusing. And like, you don't like, I don't wish it upon anybody.
I think they should have stuck to the old wave a little longer. I'm not a fan of the French New Wave.
I mean, there's part of it that's super interesting, and from like a technical aspect and a storytelling thing to watch, like, in like the early 60s and stuff, Godard do like a whole bunch of jump cuts and weird things that people just weren't like doing.
Accidental, right? Like he just didn't have the footage to do anything other than jump cuts, and he got a little artistic credit for maybe something that he did by mistake.
Who knows? I mean, that's one of those things that, like, I don't know that we'll ever truly know the actual story from all of that sort of stuff.
Because I'm not going to listen to anybody.
No, I'm not listening to none of y'all.
Now, here's a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have, like, I don't know, much familiarity with France or French culture? Have you been to Paris?
No. You know what's hilarious is, like, in high school, there were a couple of trips, and one of them was to Paris. Now, all the Paris kids, like all the kids that were in the French club ended up going, and I knew some of those people, and they went and they had a good time. My ex-wife went with them. They flew over on the Concorde just as that was kind of winding its trip down there and everything. So, like, that was kind of interesting. But like any of the trips and stuff that like I think people didn't want me on them, and I'll tell you why. All of my friends would be like, yeah, we're not doing that. There was like a trip to DC. We're not doing that. That's stupid. We didn't say the word stupid. It was the 90s, but you can put it together. But we're like, we're not doing that. We're not going to that. I'm like, yeah, that's stupid. We're not going to that. I'm not going to do it. And then they all went, and I was stuck back at school with, the undesirables, and while everyone else took these fancy trips and stuff. So no, I've never been anywhere because they won't let me.
Nowadays kids say, we're not going to do that. That's neurodiverse.
That's neurodiverse. That would be fantastic.
Anyway, sorry. I it's one of those, it's my word. I can use it.
Yeah.
Now I studied French for 4 years in college, and part of studying French language, you also study French culture. I spent some time in Paris, and I just do understand a little bit of the motivation for it and why this might have been a lot more humorous, perhaps, to a French viewer than it is particularly to a modern day American viewer. But the French culture, particularly in Paris, has a reputation for an inflexibility of thought.
Mm-hmm.
And you really see that illustrated here, which gave me a chuckle. Like I would not like belly laughs and knee slappers, but for example, like the doorman, his door shatters, but he still feels like he needs to keep opening it when people come. Mm-hmm. That to me seems like stereotypical French approach to something. And that's kind of why there's like an old joke that I'm sure you've probably heard. Some of our listeners have definitely heard, but in heaven, the chefs are French and the bureaucrats are English, but in hell, the chefs are English and the bureaucrats are French because they're the most unhelpful bureaucrats. But so a lot of that rigidity and inflexibility is what's being poked fun of here. But I don't know if modern audiences kind of get it. And I don't really get it on like a level where I enjoy it, but I'm like, okay, I get what he's trying to say here.
Well, let's also talk a little bit about this, because this is what I think is interesting about this. And like I said, this is 1963, I believe, for this film. So we're still at an era. And again, when you think about France, especially like kind of back in the 60s and stuff like that, you're still at a time of transition in a weird way. The war is over. We are in in prospering times and things like that. And at this point in the specific time frame in the 60s and stuff, we are getting into this very futuristic kind of thing. We are going towards, modernity and stuff. We're going in, branching out the culture of France. And you can see it in this film is like, we take all the things that are French and we don't show you any of them. We hide them all.
Also, France famously has been very protective of French culture, like actually making laws for a while that you could only show so many American films in France over the course of a year. Yeah. Not just American films, limit the number of foreign films. Mm-hmm. When they joined the EU, they had to change a lot of their cultural rules and laws and stuff. But they also fiercely defend themselves against anti-French stuff, which is why it's kind of interesting when they're at the expo or wherever it is, and they've got a lot of stuff that's English, like the titles are all in English, and then the one guy's talking in German. Like it's sort of showing in this post-war rebuilding era that other cultures are making their way in.
Right, they're making their way in, and the way of life is changing for everybody. And I think that is one thing that he's really trying to show here, is that like times have changed. This is not the France that you knew previously. We are, we're technologically advanced now, and those things don't always necessarily end up being an actual advancement. I mean, just take for example, and it's done for a great laugh, is our main quote unquote main character that we kind of follow and everything. He goes into this place and talks to a doorman who then fumbles around with this giant switchboard that you have no idea how it works. You don't even think he really knows how it works. We finally summon a guy. He walks down an endless hallway. It takes like 3 minutes to get there. It is just so slow. Then the other guy, he's not ready when the guy finally gets there. And then eventually he just opens up a door for him. An unlocked door. Yes. A door's not even locked. Yes. He could have just the guy should have said, go sit in there. And we wasted, quote unquote, 3 minutes just showing this. And again, but this is a commentary on the current modern society.
And the inflexibility of French thought too. I think that's part of what he's commenting on there too, is like so my old French professor, he talked about like if you're in France and you ask someone, oh, do you know Fred Johnson? They won't say, no, I don't know Fred Johnson. They'll be more like, there is no Fred Johnson. Like that is their attitude. And it's like, do you know how to get to Fred's Bakery? There's no such place. That is they assume they must know everything. So if they don't know it, it can't exist.
That's, listen,
a little bit of that here.
My last name is French, so it all starts to, I think things are starting to adding up.
But, it's... shot on 70 millimeter. You want to talk about that?
Yeah.
That's something you probably can comment on more than me.
First of all, the movie looks amazing. Now, there's so much of this movie that is, I say most of this movie is shot in a wide shot, right? So we are seeing so much going on here. And with 70 millimeter, one of the cool things about that too, especially if you are doing it like they are here and you've got complete control over everything, because they built all these sets, by the way. These aren't just buildings that are there.
Ridiculous what they built here.
These are sets.
That is why it's impressive. Like a lot of the stuff that's impressive about this movie isn't the story. Like when you hear, oh, this is a great movie, and then you watch it expecting to just bust a gut laughing, you're not going to do that. You got to kind of appreciate the filmmaking process, I think, to get into it. And I don't appreciate that process enough.
Well, and there's a bit of Where's Waldo in here as well, is because there's so much going on because of that 70 millimeter frame and everything, and the fact that you have such high resolution, so to speak, way deep in the background and stuff, and you can keep everything super in focus. There is so much stuff that's going on that you can watch this film 10 times and you won't see everything because there's so much little bits going on here, there, and everywhere.
And, as I said before, I was not familiar with Tati, but I read a little bit, did some research on this film before the show, and he detested close-ups, and that's why he has the 70 millimeter. He loved the long shots, and I mean, he really likes the ballet of difficult blocking. I talking about Hollywood books, I have listened a couple times to the first audiobook from Ash from the Evil Dead. What's his name?
Bruce Campbell.
Bruce Campbell, yeah. And he's talking about how blocking has become a lost art in filmmaking. But boy, you go back to 1967 when Tati's making this, there is blocking out. It blows your mind, the blocking.
Well, part of the problem with this movie and the fact that it took so long to make is because he was so exacting about all of that stuff. He directed every bit of it. And then when I say every bit of it, I mean he talked to every person that was on screen and got them through their thing. Goes, here's what your arc is. Here's what you're doing in this shot. And did it to everyone for the whole film.
You want to, but it's pretty cool. And I guess this Monsieur Hulot character was a known commodity at this point, so he got the time and the money he needed to make it.
I feel like he's also like, and again, this is me talking out my butt here because I don't know history, but like I like to imagine that he's very much like a Inspector Clouseau kind of character that's always just kind of around getting into little things, maybe little Mr. Beanish to a degree.
He himself described the character as he wanted to make like a French version of Charlie Chaplin's Tramp.
Well, and I mean, obviously wanted to make that as an obvious thing to me because really this movie for me would be amazing on a double bill with Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times.
Yes,
because they're very much parallel in their kind of ideas, but at different moments in history.
I don't know which one you put first, though, because, boy, it's going to be hard to sit through both. It's just a lot of time invested with this one to be part of a double feature.
Well, yeah, this is, I feel like this is the end of the night one where everybody's kind of tired and maybe it's a tough one. It's a tough thing to get. But Modern Times is great because it came out at a time when silent films were all but dead. Right?
Yes.
Modern Times is technically a silent film, but it's also technically not a silent film because there are a couple of synced audio moments within that thing.
And hey, if I can interject, I felt a lot of times like this movie would work without subtitles, like not quite a silent film because you got the sound effects and stuff. You need some of the sound design for some of the jokes, but it almost works like a silent film. Like I didn't really have to pay that much attention to the subtitles at times to watch the movie.
Well, I mean, like a lot of films of the era, and especially shot like in Europe and stuff at the time, this movie was shot with no sync sound. So you have Italian a lot of that style going through.
I mean, I'm all familiar with the low budget Italian stuff, but I thought, France, the first country, Germany was going there until, the whole Nazi thing came along and ruined it with their film industry because they had their existentialism or whatever. But France was the country that treated cinema like an art form when the others treated it like pulp kind of stuff, like a distraction. So I'm surprised that they weren't leading the way with syncing sound.
And the thing is that sound is such an important part of this film and something that I would definitely say that, and you're absolutely right, is that
and the sound design is great.
You could play this with no dialogue, but it's tough to play this with no sound because the sound is so important here. There's not a ton of score. There's some score during the parts that make sense with the bands playing and a little bit of underscore, but not a lot of regular, just kind of like, here's a musical score moment.
And in retrospect, when you say they didn't actually roll sound on set, now it's kind of obvious because of the way that, and I was thinking at the time, like, they did some interesting tricks where they were rolling sound, turning it off, turning it back on is what I thought they were doing for the silent door slams. Because I'm saying, okay, this is a trick, or I don't want to downplay things by calling them tricks or gimmicks, but I'll use those words because they're techniques.
Movie magic.
Yeah, they do some lighting tricks that happen to be on my mind because I took a lighting class the day before I watched this, and I was really impressed with some of those, some of the sound design, which I've always been like a sound design nerd. For what a really weird thing to be a nerd about, right? But I love sound design, and so I appreciated some of the knowing this was at a time where everything was pretty much done in camera is awesome too. For these wide sweeping shots with no drones. I mean,
they just sit there. They sit there with it. There are a lot of long takes and stuff. It's not cutting all over the place. So you get to sit and watch this thing unfold. And then your eyes are the camera at this point. You are deciding where to go and what to look at. You become almost a secondary director within this film because we're showing you this big giant canvas with all of this stuff going on. Now we're going to try to point you with sound cues and other things to particular things to focus on. But the great part is that even if you don't focus on those things, there are other things going on that you're easily going to go, oh, look at that, look at that, look at that. And there's so much to absorb with this thing that you can't do it on one sitting at all. But at the same time too, this is not going to be the easiest film to continue to go back to either.
The set that they constructed was known as Tottyville, I'm reading, because it was so big, it was like its own city. And the budget in 1964, it was released in 67, but it took a very long time to make. So in 1964 dollars, $3.4 million US. So I don't know what that would be in today's dollars, but I was sitting here looking at how expensive this thing looked to me, and it looks so expensive by the standards of the time.
Mm-hmm. But speaking of expensive, this is a great part to kind of go into, because I think the film is also speaking to a lot of this stuff as well. Again, like that kind of idea of the modern times where we're updating, you only see the Eiffel Tower within a reflection on a window. Like that's in the past. That's something that is behind us right now. We are not looking at that. We are only looking towards the future. But everything in the future sucks. It's all constructed horribly, there's no tradition, nothing behind it. It's all just
when people, particularly in this era when there's no digital trickery, when people are able to use reflections effectively, I'm impressed. And later in the movie, we're going to talk about a really cool thing he does with the reflection.
But with all of that stuff, it is just basically saying, listen, we got all this new stuff. It looks all shiny. It looks interesting and futuristic. Everything is always clean and shiny and stuff. But the problem is, it's all broken. The problem is none of it works. You got this light to light up these stairs, but it's always on the fritz.
He'll just occasionally slip to remind us that all these floors are like those polished tile floors, like you see in industrial buildings now, instead of carpet and no wood or anything. And it does start to drag with me, though, and I feel like Tati is in love with his own shots a little too much. Like maybe some of this should have been on the cutting room floor. Like, who am I to criticize this guy? But you know what? That's what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
Like, I felt like we spend too much time just being voyeurs through those glass windows in that apartment complex. Like, and there's not really anything interesting going on, in my opinion, while that's going on. That was, me, at least.
While watching that one, it felt like Tati had a couple years prior, had obviously seen Hitchcock's Rear Window and goes, oh, this is interesting. I can kind of, do a bit of a riff on that. But what he doesn't understand is that, like, Hitchcock was doing a lot of stuff was going on. You have some interesting parallel actions going on, and I guess that is, again, speaking to the modernity idea of everybody, getting in after a day, sitting down and watching television or something like that, doing a thing that's, mind-numbing, maybe. I guess that's part of how you look at it, but it's just... You're right. It's a little long. It's a little involved with that particular one, and I think you're right. There's a couple of times where you're just like, okay, I think we got the point.
yeah. There's some times when it just seems to just linger a little longer than it needs to, and particularly when you look at the bloat. I hate to use the word bloated because it all looks beautiful, but it's a little bit of a bloated runtime for a movie that has no story.
Yeah.
And we got to make it really clear. The closest thing to a story is it's about an American woman who visits Paris and sees how different it is, I guess, from America. And meanwhile, Hulo's following her around.
Yeah. We half follow an American group and him just around this thing. And it's 24 hours for the day, more or less, I guess. Because
it's a long time, but I don't know if, it does seem like they're in that restaurant overnight, and she does change into an evening gown.
When they get to,
I don't remember anybody going to sleep.
No, nobody went. Well, Paris is like New York. The city never sleeps.
Paris might not sleep, but Americans who visit it need to. I can tell you that from firsthand experience.
But I thought it was a lot of fun. But again, I feel like it's all because it's so,
now
agoraphobic. There's so many people that are out within here and stuff as well.
It's that 70 millimeter, those wide shots, man. It's just crazy. And it's impressive. And there's a difference though, to me. And I've said this before, I don't know if it was on the Dinger Zone or here, but there's a difference to me in something being impressive and something being entertaining. And though I can watch this and be impressed, it's not until the end when I'm really starting to finally feel entertained. I'm a little entertained at the beginning, very entertained at the end. But in the middle, I'm just watching like, okay, I know what he's going for here. I know what they're doing there. I'm watching it like it's homework and I'm going to have to talk about it in class, which is kind of what it was, because that's kind of what we do here. But it was like if I was just browsing through your Criterion account and I started watching this, I probably wouldn't have made it to the part I liked. I would have probably went and watched Godzilla again.
Yeah, I'll definitely say that for the uninitiated and stuff, it's a movie that you kind of have to be ready for. And I think the first time that I attempted to watch this, I wasn't quite ready for it. I think because you can get about you'll get about halfway in, and then like you'll either need like a little break, or you kind of go, oh, maybe this wasn't exactly what I kind of thought going into the whole, deal or whatever, because you are dealing with a very kind of, I don't want to say it's a sketch movie, but like it's a set piece movie. Here's another little set piece. Here's another little set piece.
It reminded me of those little anthology cartoons that I used to watch on TBS or whatever, which is like the Cars of Tomorrow from, the Warner Brothers cartoons where they have the goofy cars that are supposed to be made in the future.
Yeah.
And it kind of had a little bit of that feel to it. I couldn't tell if this was supposed to be in the future or just showing the futuristic changes coming to modern day Paris when they were there. I couldn't quite get if that was supposed to be contemporaneous or set in the near future.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to probably, I mean, this sounds like a ridiculous thing to say, but I think both at the same time, yes and no. But with the, I think, again, this is where you have that modern times comparison here and stuff. We were, with modern times, we were going from that world of, talkie film or silent films rather, to talkies, and it's about that kind of going from one kind of extreme to another one, and what that takes, what it takes to go from the one thing to the other. And I think this is kind of that France version. We're leaving a lot of things that France is known for in the past. We talk about, like, they go, hey, there's this the famous bridge, it's right over that way, and well, you can't see the bridge anymore because it's blocked by a building. That is them clearly just going, listen, modern life has, this quote unquote progress has gotten in front of, a beautiful architectural structure here that we put together for years. And now it's just this building that we're looking for. When you look at all of the destination posters that are on the windows and stuff at the airport and everything, they're all for like Mexico and this place and that place. But they all have a building in front of whatever they're looking at, because they don't want to show you what these places look like, because in this world, so to speak, they don't exist anymore. Those places, you can't go to Mexico. It's not Mexico anymore. It's a building just like the building that's outside this building right now.
I do like that. Now, what did you think about the color coding of this movie?
Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, like if this were a modern movie, we would say, well, they shot it and then they went in and did some color correction.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know what I mean? You know how you do when you shoot something. You don't just take your raw footage. You go in, you play with the colors a little bit. What'd you think about the color scheme on here? The color coding is the only term I can think of. I don't know the right term.
I guess just color choices for the movie itself, because it's very monochromatic for a lot of stuff, a lot of like blues and grays and stuff like that.
It's the sort of thing that was all done in camera, whereas nowadays you do it in post. You know what I mean? You just turn down the saturation of the colors.
Oh yeah, it's all specifically.
He intentionally had everything desaturated. And when I say my research, I mean, that's like I Google Tati's Playtime and I try to find anything other than Wikipedia and just read a couple of critics' things. But what I read was that he wanted it to look like a black and white film, but not be black and white.
Yeah. Just because again, it's take away the idea of the bright lights and the colorfulness of Paris is kind of what we think. Think of it like the movie An American in Paris, right? The Gene Kelly film, fantastic movie. But like it's a vibrant kind of thing. Even though the movie's in black and white, it's still a vibrant sort of thing that's going on here. This takes all of that and just turns it down. We turn the contrast down until the end, and we'll talk about that when we get there. But we just turn that down, and we only use very specific colors for, popping purposes, if you will.
And until I read it, after I watched the movie and then went and read some of the criticism, I didn't get it, but now it makes sense. But the lady's green dress was really supposed to stick out like a sore thumb in this film. And I think that was lost on me when I watched it the first time, but now I can kind of see what he was going for with it, particularly when the French ladies look at the American wearing her outdated, colorful clothes when they're all wearing drab stuff.
Oh, it was
lost on me at the time.
I love the American lady stuff. They all have the hats and stuff, and then somebody goes around and like we frame it as if they're filling water glasses, but we frame it as if he's watering all of these hats, which is great.
In the 80s, we had the stereotype of the Japanese tourist with the camera around his neck.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the 60s, I guess Paris had that stereotype of the American tourist, because the American lady's just taking a picture of the random flower lady, and then another American comes up and wants to take a picture of the American taking a picture of the flower lady.
I love it. He hijacks
like
the situation. Like, all right, hey, this looks great. No, I tell you what, you get in this shot right here, and this lady's holding the camera going, but I was taking a picture.
Meanwhile, her friends are like, hurry up. But I would have left her butt there, I got to tell you.
But she does not want a candid shot when you think about it, because like the kids there are like hanging out. She's like, get out of the frame, you bunch of jerks. We don't want you here. She's like, all right, get out, all right, fine. And like every move she's making, she gets thwarted. It's great.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, like, because you mentioned design and how she looks and everything. Let's talk about Hulot and how what he's wearing and what that actually says. And I don't know if this is something that you quite picked up on.
I didn't pick up. In fact, I was disappointed that I felt like his character didn't have enough character. So I'll let you tell me what I missed. Well,
when you look at everyone's clothes within this, the majority of people in this movie are wearing blacks or grays. There's not a ton of blues, but a lot of blacks and grays and stuff like that. Whereas Hulot, what he is doing, if you look specifically even at his shoes, he's wearing brown shoes. Now,
and he's got some Argyle type socks.
A little tweed jacket and stuff like that. So he's got a lot of, he is a country boy. I don't know anything about this character, but as far as I'm
brown
concerned.
To town. I learned that from you.
So this is a country guy who is walking out here. He doesn't look like anybody else. He's not dressed like anybody else. And as a matter of fact, when we get to a point where we do undress him, he gets mistaken for another person, because it's like he's not wearing his drab hobo kind of gear and stuff. But at the same time, too, when you look about at all the people that are like at the expo and stuff like that, the Americans, the other people, the others, if you will, are dressed more like him than like all the other, business people and stuff in Paris. So it's still certainly othering the other people and everything, but it's also othering all the business people, because those are the people that are all kind of your lockstep, are inbound or going through all the system and stuff like that. And you see that obviously with the big office scene, which I absolutely love how that is stylized and everything, with these cubicles that are like actual just cubes. It doesn't even look like there's a door on them.
From what I read, once again, true, not true, I don't know. I'm not trying to say there are no leopards in India like I did once. But from what I read, it suggested that like cubicles weren't a thing. Like he just kind of like, this is one place where he actually did predict the future a little bit.
Well, I mean, if nothing else, it looks great. And then there's just, I like how the like back wall of them are all like filing cabinets and stuff like that. Just weird stuff. And then you have this entire phone conversation with people that you can actually see within the booths themselves making these phone calls. And again, it's talking about the, again, modernity of the fact that, instead of walking down and just talking to this person for 5 seconds, we pick up a phone call. So much so that you can literally just hear them talking over the thing. You can, but you can hear them in the open air there. You can hear
once again. So I feel like in the cell phone, especially the earlier cell phone eras before texting was the way to communicate, I feel like I'd been in a situation where people on opposite ends of the room were having cell phone conversation with each other. Yeah.
It's like, oh, because we can, because it was cool or whatever. But there's a little bit of that going on. And again, a lot of this stuff that we're seeing, a lot of these work days and things, it feels like what we kind of saw in modern times, where it's just like, hey, here are all the updated things, all the stuff that's supposed to make our job better, or supposed to make our jobs, easier or whatnot. And as you see in modern times, obviously in a much more crazy over the top slapstick fashion, that things go wrong and stuff like that. This is more about like, while we're doing it with a smile on our face, it also feels like we're circling a drain. That's what this thing feels like. Is it's like, hey, we're trying to do good. Everything's fine. It's looking good. We're dealing with the new modern stuff just fine, when everything is in the background is on fire and exploding. We're talking to an architect out at our opening night here. We're talking at the architect and screaming at him because things aren't built right. It's like, who else does this? Nobody. But again, that's part of, it feels like a culture that's struggling with its identity at this point. And my guess is 1960s France, there's probably a lot of that going on.
Now, here's something I ran across on Wikipedia. And if this is true, I can't believe I didn't think of this. But it says that Tati used life-size cutout photographs of people to save money on extras.
That's what's so great, is that like there are mannequins and cutouts and stuff in this, and like some again, all of this stuff is so blatant and just purposeful that like there are people that are interacting with mannequins within this movie itself.
That's pretty cool.
They are and ones that you will see standing there and you go like, well, that's probably a mannequin, and then beep, 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 and then that mannequin starts moving. So it's like, it's everything that's one of the most important things to bring into this movie, is that everything that you're seeing on screen is done solely and wildly on purpose. And yes, it is meant to be sprawling. It is meant to be this wide open thing that is then open for interpretation. I think that that's one of the things. And like I said, I'm just saying what I think this movie is about when I'm talking about the technology and the time in France. Because I don't know jack squat about the 60s in France, but my guess is, based upon a couple of markers within time and history and stuff like that, that's my assumption for this movie. But what was your kind of just overall thought, I guess? Like that.
Well,
does that
one
make
thing
sense?
I'll mention is Vietnam was once known as French Indochina. So when they're talking about army, there had been some military issues between France and Vietnam before America had entered into the Vietnam War. So maybe that's got some of that, like, hey, it's me from the army. Like everybody was in the army for a little bit, because I think he's not quite, I don't know, maybe he is old enough to have been in World War II, but everybody he sees from the army makes me think it has to be something a little more recent.
Well, I mean, let's see. I think Tati was born in like 1907. So,
geez, Louise, I didn't know he was that old.
Yeah, so he and again, this is
never
a guy.
Mind. Once again, there are indeed leopards in India. I'm sorry.
This is a guy who had seen some stuff at this point, especially again at that time in France. As an adult, you've seen where all of this stuff goes through, and again, you've also seen the modernization of France and this kind of old school town and everything. And then we've got the 21st century, knocking on your door saying, hey, stuff's coming down the way here and you better be prepared for it. And they clearly aren't prepared for it, both either culturally or, physically in a lot of ways, where the stuff's just not up to snuff.
Now, did you laugh at anything? A comedy, I think a comedy should make you laugh, even though I know that not all comedies need to make you laugh to still be a comedy. But did anything really make you laugh?
Listen, I'm a proponent of old school, silent film and stuff like that. So,
I love physical comedy, but I don't know, man. Like I thought it was clever. A lot of stuff that was clever, and I liked the commentary. But when I did start laughing, I think part of it was almost like Stockholm syndrome near the end, when like, oh my goodness, something finally, like when he's in the restaurant and he jumps up to grab something and all the loose boards or whatever fall down and the restaurant starts falling apart. I laughed then because I was just happy something happened. I felt like we just watched waiters screwing up delivering their food for 30 minutes in that restaurant. And then it got real hot and the airplane melted. That made me laugh. But what really got a chuckle out of me is when they cool it off and the airplane comes back and it unmelts.
This plastic airplane is sitting on a bar, and when the air conditioning just breaks and the thing gets too hot, it sloops down and the wings are just droopy. But you're right, that
really
that
cool effect.
That in and of itself very funny. But when we finally fix the AC, it rises back up to its regular form.
Yes, I loved it.
We all wish things worked that well. To where you could just be like, turn on the AC. We didn't ruin this toy after all. What a great world that would be.
I want to make sure we have plenty of time to talk about the big finish here. Is there any important stuff that we really need to cover before we go into the big finish? Because if you ask me, this whole movie is the end.
I love we talked about it for half a second, but the door gag that continues to go on, it's funny to me.
And more of the inflexibility of French thought. He's in that drugstore thing, which is kind of an open market, but he tries to exit, but he doesn't, like, even though the whole thing is open and you can just walk out wherever you want, the guy keeps telling him he has to go through the turnstile to exit. Like, to me, that was the kind of funny annoyances that I feel like I put up with in life.
Yeah. And again, a lot of glass and stuff in this separating people. So again, the modern stuff of while we can all see each other and have, so to speak, better access to each other at the same time too, we are still separated. It's not real, this connection and stuff. You're able to see somebody, but you're not able to interact with that person. And we see that throughout the entire movie. So there's things like that it's it sounds pretentious to be like this is a thinking man's movie because like it is kind of a comedy. It is a little stupid, but it's not. But you're right. It's not like your Chaplins or your Keatons or something like that. Those silent comedies to where they were really relying on the specific gags and stuff. This is more experiential in a lot of ways because the way that the sound design and everything works. It feels like you're there, but like it sounds like what life sounds like. The soundtrack itself, like I said, there's not like a lot of sound drops.
Yeah, extra impressive how much ambient sound there is for something that wasn't rolling sound on set.
Exactly. That's so the sound, the thing that you're at becomes the musical score of it, if you will. The constant humming of fluorescence and things like that, your neon lights and whatnot, to that and again it's that modern thing coming down, and it doesn't need to be there, but there's that light little tone that's in the background there that's saying you're not where you used to be. Things are different. We didn't used to have these sounds. There wasn't this cacophony of things going on all the time. But in your modern world, that's what that is. That background is that cacophonous noise that comes through and is just smashing you at all times. And it's not subtle. And that's what's nice about it, too, is that it's like, no, in most movies, you'd kind of turn that down. And this one, you have to turn that up because that is what it is.
Yes. Now, can we talk about that phenomenal ending?
Okay.
So I had no idea that this existed. So I'm seeing this totally for the first time, totally not expecting it. Also, I'm like really kind of watching how much time is left because I kind of wanted the movie to be over. But then he creates a carousel with like 100 cars in downtown Paris. And we start off with like a crane shot, like something from above. And the cars are moving so perfectly and so uniformly that I really thought he had built a gigantic rotating platform and put the cars on it. But then you get closer and you realize that these cars are being choreographed and moved at this constant speed with this constant distance. And he's doing all of these effects to mimic a carousel. And they're playing the carousel music, of course, just in case you don't get it. But I am so blown away with the amount of effort.
A girl is driving, like a couple is driving by on a motorcycle, and like the girl on the back is doing the kind of bobbing up and down motion like that you would have on that carousel. Exactly. So like,
and there's a guy cleaning there's a guy cleaning a window as a tourist bus goes by, and every time he opens the window, the reflection goes up, and the people on the bus go, whoa, and then he closes the window and it goes back down. They go, oh, whoa. So it makes it look like the bus is going up and down, and they like make a little noise every time the reflection goes up as if they're going up. This was just so beautiful. The effort, the timing. I can only imagine how long it took to get what they got here. It's just too good to be true, particularly at a time when there were no cheats. There were no cheat codes then. You had to set this up and film it until you got it right. And it goes on and on when you think it's already amazing just in the beginning, and it keeps building and building. And this is a lot of movie to sit through. And I can understand if people don't want to sit through it, but I looked, and you can go online and just see this. It's called Tati's Carousel of Cars. And if you don't want to watch the movie, at least go watch that because it's beautiful. It's impressive. It just filled me with so much joy. It's a good way to make a movie. If you end with this amazing feeling, you're going to go home thinking that the whole movie was amazing, right? Even if it maybe wasn't.
Bruce, you ignorant slut.
Uh-oh.
This is a horror ending.
It's a what?
This is the end of a horror movie. This is not good. This is like, while you are correct, it is shot in this fantastic way. It is showing you all these things, and it does so in a very interesting manner. This is not good. This is a bad ending. This is a bad ending in as much as it's not just a carousel, but when you hear the music, it sounds like a circus. This is a circus. Yeah. This is a mess. This is not supposed to be. It's like everyone gets out, and then what are we doing?
Unnatural.
We're back into this grind of this
You're just
thing.
Going in a circle like a carousel. You can spend hours driving and get nowhere.
And it means absolutely nothing. And that's where this film feels like. It's like we are in this modern thing. We are, again, the whole movie takes place in that structure, opening up at the beginning of the day, and we're right back to where we started at.
I think making that pessimistic point in such a enjoyable fashion is a joyful thing to do. I mean, I say sometimes just because something's impressive doesn't mean it's entertaining. Well, here I'm impressed and entertained, which is peak cinema for me.
Yeah, it works. It works on so many levels. It sounds stupid to say, but it does. Now, before we get to our final review, we do have to find out how this French Where's Waldo film relates back 1-to-1 with Sylvester Stallone. And wouldn't you know it, I happen to have a prepared statement.
Good, because I don't.
Bonjour, Monsieur Stallone. It's your good buddy Adam. Adam Portress. Yeah, from HMP. Oh, you don't know what that is? Over 8 years, and you still don't know what HMP is. I'm not sure who we're to blame for that. Society, perhaps. I don't know. Mr. Stallone, I'm going to level with you. Sean tried. He really tried, Mr. Stallone, but cracker factories are some of the roughest duties that you could possibly imagine, and those are the duties that befell Sean this week. Duties. I wanted to see how many times I could say duties and make Bruce laugh. How'd I do? I was only one. I was less than I had imagined. Yeah, you got one laugh.
That's worth it.
That's good. All duties aside, though, it came to me to conjure up a connection worthy of one of our finest American exports, you, Mr. Stallone. Now, I know that some of our listeners might think that Jacques Tati directed the third Expendables movie, but he was dead by 1982, and you'd only gotten that low-rent stink of porno off you in 1982, so I don't think you were going to be working with no Jacques Tati just yet. No, sorry, Bob, but come on, you know it wasn't going to happen in the first place. But if you look at the average person in this film, they all look like they had one hand on a baguette and the other foot on a banana peel, headed for the arc de death. That's a French thing I just made up. So the odds are that somewhere out there deep in the background talking to some mannequin while droves of people mill about who connects back 1-to-1 with you, pretty scanty. But you know what isn't scanty, Mr. Stallone? Your connection to France. Yes, while this is a French film and it is set in France, the City of Lights takes a back seat in this long film limo as it rolls up its tinted glass for privacy. Perhaps. Shame? Maybe. But you? No, Mr. Stallone. For all the crap you get for being a guy who looks like he needs to take off his shoes to count higher than 10, you're quite the cultured man, and as such, Mr. Stallone, you are no stranger to France. Stallone and his family have been vacationing in France for ages, and it's, kind of what you do when you got a lot of money. Getty Images themselves has over 81 high-res photos of you in France spanning the last 20 years, and let me tell you something, you're looking a lot better than you did back in 2007. Yikes. In 2015, many Stallone paintings were shown in a gallery in Nice, movie premieres, opening of Planet Hollywood in Paris. Even Rambo 5 had its teaser trailer at the Cannes Film Festival, for crying out loud. France is a place that purports itself to be a great world-class city with history and architecture and culture up the wazoo. Or at least that's like the idea they still try to sell to Americans. I hear it's pretty much like San Francisco, except all the homeless there have much more, demanding palate. So raise your white flag this week as we hastily put together the Stallone connection to the country of France. Maybe Sean will be here next week.
Okay,
Maybe.
I'm going to give you one more connection.
Hold on. Until then, your big dumb pal from the internet, Adam. Yeah, go ahead.
There's a movie called Victory, set in World War II, filmed in France, starring one Sylvester Stallone, where POWs have to play soccer against Nazis.
Man, it ain't as good as The Longest Yard, but, you do what you got to do.
Victoire. Pele was in that one.
Pele was in anything that had soccer to do in the 70s. That's kind of was like you just had to, on account of. All right, here at HMP, we have our own Robin rating system. Bruce, where does Jacques Tati's Playtime from 1963 fall in the Robin rating system for you?
Well, it's like I really love the ending. The ending is a Dick Grayson to me. It just is as a visual spectacle, but taken as a whole, it's right on that border of Damian Wayne and Tim Drake for me. And I'm going to give it Damian Wayne overall. It's just a little too long. And I would only recommend it to some people.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that sentiment at all. I think that that's pretty accurate. This is not going to be a movie that is for everybody, but for the people that it is for when you do find something in it, you're really going to like it. And that's why, and part of me, I was trying to pick out, like I said, movies that I had either, not seen before or only kind of half seen with this particular case, and movies that I thought also might appeal to you guys and stuff, as well as things that you might not have seen. And like, especially with this one, I was like, Sean is going to be all over this one from a design aspect and stuff like that. And maybe we'll talk with him on Dinger Zones on a couple of the movies that he's kind of missed with us here and everything. But, I enjoy this movie a lot. It is, in every one of Bruce's criticisms is absolutely valid. It is a little overlong, but luckily, chances are you can pause it wherever you want and just go get a sandwich and come back and do whatever. But I do like it, and I will say this is, and one of the things that got me. I don't know how long ago the video was, but you just look up Video Game Dunky, Dunky, on YouTube there, and Playtime, and he did like a 5-minute review of this thing. You watch that, and if you like that little 5-minute review, go and try to check out this movie, because I think that will gauge of whether or not you might have any interest in this film, just because it's shown to you in this manner that gives you a lot of the, broad brushstrokes of the film. And I would think if you haven't seen it, would probably get you more jacked to see it than, like a trailer or something like that. Because a trailer for this, you're going to be like, what the hell am I even watching?
Yeah.
But I think I'll link that actually in the show notes there so people can check that out. But ultimately, I got to give this a... I can't give it a Damien. I feel like I got to go. No, wait. My brain is now.
Tim Drake is above Damien.
Tim Drake is what I was thinking. I'm like, why is my brain blanking on all our stupid Robins? We've done this for 8 years. Tim Drake, solid Tim Drake. It's really good. It needs a little bit of chip chopping, but if you can get past that and really enjoy the spectacle that you're watching, again, I suggest watching this on the biggest television that you can, because there is a lot of information that's going on. You're going to want to look at a lot of different things, and if you've got some good sound, turn it up. Because there's a lot that is dependent upon the sound in this. Some of it will help guide your eye. Others of it will help, like I said, more or less provide a sonic score for you, because there's not a lot of music that goes on until we get to specific, later portions of the film and stuff. But, so that's an important bit of it. But ultimately, I feel like it's something that you may not go back and watch 100 times, but I think most people, if you have any like little artsy inclinations, this would be a decent one shot. Just check it out at least once, or at least the first half hour. If you like it, keep on going. That is it, everybody. Another episode of HMP in the books. We'll talk about what we're doing next week in the moment. But Bruce, tell people about what we talked about on Patreon this week.
We talked about the Marvels.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I want to make sure that's what you meant, because I it feels like a long time ago all of a sudden. We talked about the Marvels, that movie that just came out.
Yeah, so a lot of people were curious as to what our thoughts on the Marvels would be, and we just decided to continue on with our classics series here and everything. But Bruce and I went out to go see the Marvels, so check that out over there on the Dinger Zone. We'd really appreciate it. Again, it's if you join up for $1. It's $1 for an entire month. You didn't spend much of nothing. You probably would have dropped that on the street anyways, if we're frank with ourselves. Lost it in between the car seats. That happens all the time. Throw it our way, and then, get yourself a little bit of extra content at the exact same time. We really appreciate that, and we love all of you guys for doing so. Next week, we're going to be talking... It's funny, Bruce, because we talked previously with the Patreon vote and everything of how it was actually a really close vote. With the classics and martial arts films. So now next week, we're going to be doing a classic martial arts film. That's right, because you can do both of those things at the same time. And this is one that I think maybe not a lot of people have seen. Perhaps you've heard the name before, and we'll talk about some of the times that name has popped up in pop culture and everything. But next week, we're going to be talking the Jimmy Wang Yu classic Master of the Flying Guillotine. It's available on, I think it's on Tubi right now. I know it's on YouTube, so there's no excuse for you not to be able to see this thing. But Master of the Flying Guillotine, I've seen this one before, but I know a lot of other people haven't. And listen, when there's a hat that somebody throws that goes over to a person's head, and then you pull on a chain and that decapitates the person, that's what the flying guillotine is. It's amazing. You got to watch this.
I gotta check it out. I've never seen it.
So check it out next week. Master of the Flying Guillotine for the absent Sweet Sean Kovacs from the internet. Bruce Leslie, I'm Adam Portress. Stay super, everybody.
Goodbye, Marty and Evie.